8 years after the divorce, his ex-wife raised her glass and said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Nathaniel's going to be a billionaire someday. In his dreams." 40 people laughed at once. Nathaniel Brooks didn't argue. He didn't even look up. He only pressed 2 fingers against his chest pocket, checking that something was still there. He had told his wife he came tonight to close the door on the past. So why did he bring the notebook? And why, in 8 years, had he never let a single person read it? The parking lot of the Halloran Hotel was half empty and lit the color of weak coffee. Nathaniel Brooks sat in a pickup truck, built in 1998, engine off, watching the windows of the ballroom 2 floors up. Shapes moved behind the glass. Somebody up there was already laughing. His phone lit against the dashboard. "Go, Dad. I'm fine. There's leftovers. Stop texting me." He read it 3 times. Elijah was 16 now, which meant he answered in short sentences, and meant every one of them. Nathaniel typed back that he'd be home by 11, deleted it. Typed that he loved him, deleted that too, and finally sent a thumbs up, because that was the only language the kid still accepted without rolling his eyes. Then he sat there. 4 minutes. He could see the clock on the radio, so he knew exactly how long it was. He told himself he was letting a song finish, except the radio wasn't on. He told himself he was checking his tie in the mirror, except he'd already done that in the morning with Ash standing behind him not saying anything, which was its own kind of saying something. He had told her he was going to close a door tonight. He'd said it in the kitchen with his hands on her shoulders, and he had believed it the whole time it was coming out of his mouth. He leaned over and opened the glove box. The notebook was where it always was, under the registration, and a folded permit slip that had expired years ago. Black cover softened at the corners the way leather gets when a thing has been carried more than it's been read. He didn't open it. He just moved it from the truck to the inside pocket of his jacket where it sat against his ribs with a weight that had nothing to do with paper. Then he got out and shut the door, and the sound it made was old and loud and honest. Nobody recognized him for the first 10 minutes, and that turned out to be the easy part. He collected a name tag from a folding table, wrote his own name on it because they'd spelled it wrong on the printed one, and walked into a room full of people who had all decided somewhere around their late 30s to become the version of themselves they'd been rehearsing since graduation. There was a bar in the corner. There were photographs of Fulton High, blown up too large and pinned to the walls, all of them grainy, all of them kinder than the real thing had been. Recognition came in slowly, the way water finds a low spot. Nate Brooks. A man named Marcus Deal put a hand out and shook his with both of his own, which is how you shake hands with someone you've decided to feel sorry for. Marcus worked at a bank downtown and had the shoulders of a man who golfed about it. He asked what Nathaniel was up to. Nathaniel said he was in construction out of state now an hour and changed down the interstate. Marcus nodded for a beat too long. Still swinging a hammer. "Good for you, man. Honest work." The word honest landed the way it always did, like a coin dropped in a cup. Others drifted over. Somebody asked where he'd disappeared to because he had disappeared. That was the whole thing, wasn't it? He'd just gone. Somebody else said they'd tried to find him online and there was nothing. No Facebook, no Instagram, not even a LinkedIn, which Marcus said like it was a medical condition. "Everybody's got a LinkedIn," Marcus said. "My mother has a LinkedIn." Nathaniel said he'd never gotten around to it. Behind him, near the window, a man he didn't know was looking down at the parking lot and laughing about a truck. Nathaniel heard the word fossil and didn't turn around. And in the corner of the room, by the stack of unused chairs, a woman was watching him. Long coat still on drink, untouched, one of those faces that had barely moved in 20 years. Jendayi Rowe. She'd been 2 rows behind him in a chemistry class he'd nearly failed. She was watching him longer than a person watches someone they've simply remembered, and when he met her eyes, she didn't look away, and she didn't smile either. Vanessa came in at 8:15 and the room reorganized itself around her. She was still good at it. That was the thing nobody ever gave her credit for. She came through the doors with her coat over one arm and her chin up, and she touched 3 shoulders in the first 30 seconds, and she said 2 names before either person could say hers. She dropped the word Aspen. She dropped the name of a firm downtown in a way that implied she was above explaining her relationship to it. She laughed at something that wasn't funny loudly, and 4 other people laughed with her, and just like that, she was the center of gravity. The man on her arm was Corbin Vaughn, local contractor. Big watch, tight jaw, a handshake he used like a stapler. Nathaniel watched from the edge of the room and felt something go quiet in his chest that he'd been hoping would stay loud. She got to the bar before she got to him. He was close enough to see it happen. She handed the bartender a card, kept talking to the woman beside her, kept her hand moving through the air. The bartender ran it again, said something with his shoulders more than his mouth. Vanessa's expression didn't change at all. That was what got him. She laughed a real easy laugh and said something about her bank flagging everything since Denver, and she slid a second card across the bar without breaking the rhythm of her own sentence, and the woman beside her never noticed a thing. Nathaniel turned his head away before she could see that he'd been looking. He didn't know why he did it. He'd have told you it was manners. She found him 10 minutes later, and she found him with an audience because she had never once in her life started a conversation with him that only involved the 2 of them. Nathaniel. She said his whole name the way you'd read it off a plaque. You came. He said it was good to see her. You look exactly the same. She tilted her head. That's not a compliment, by the way. That's an observation. A few people laughed. Corbin didn't. Corbin was scanning the room for someone more useful. She asked about work. He said construction. She said, of course. And then she started walking backward through 8 years like a woman giving a tour of a house she used to own. She told them how he used to talk. How at 26 he'd sit at the kitchen table with a legal pad and sketch out a company. Not a crew, a company, he'd say it just like that. And how he'd talk about infrastructure like other men talked about the Bears. She was smiling the entire time. That was the trick of it. She never raised her voice. She never called him a failure. She just held each memory up to the light so everyone could see how thin it was. He used to tell me, she said, that one day he'd build something with his name on it. And here she raised her glass, and here her voice found the whole room the way a hand finds a light switch in a familiar house. Nathaniel's going to be a billionaire someday. In his dreams. 40 people laughed at once. He'd known it was coming. He'd known it in the truck. It still went through him like cold water down a collar, and the worst part wasn't her. It was the sound, the shape of it, 40 adults in good clothes agreeing about him all at the same time. He waited for it to thin out. Then he said evenly that he was doing all right, and that his wife would be coming later. She'd been held up with work. Nobody spoke for a second and a half. Then Marcus Deal said, "Oh, she's coming later," and made a small gesture with his glass, and the room laughed a second time. That one was worse. The first laugh had been about a dream. This one was about a woman who wasn't in the room to defend herself, a woman none of them had ever met, and they laughed at her anyway because Vanessa had already told them what kind of story they were in. Nathaniel felt his thumb find his wedding band and start to turn it. The conversation broke up after that the way conversations do once they've gotten what they came for. It scattered into smaller ones, and Nathaniel stayed where he was, and 2 of those smaller conversations happened close enough for him to hear. The first was Corbin, 3 drinks in, complaining to a man who clearly didn't care. Out-of-state outfit, Corbin was saying. Came in on the corridor package, Cardinal Ridge. He said the name like something he'd found on his shoe. Nobody's ever heard of them. No storefront, no billboards, nothing. They just showed up with a bid and walked out with it. 22 years I've been in this town. Nathaniel looked at the carpet and let his face do absolutely nothing. The second was Jendai, who had finally moved from her corner and was talking to a small cluster near the photographs. She worked in the alumni office at the school now, she said. She was talking about the scholarship, the one that had quietly paid tuition for 11 kids out of Fulton in the last 5 years, the one where the donor had never signed a single thing with a name on it. Anonymous, she said, 5 years, every fall on time. And a woman in the cluster turned and looked at Corbin Vaughn with her whole face lit up and said, "Corbin." Corbin looked back at her. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no either. He just let his mouth move into something modest and lifted his glass about an inch and let the moment close over him like water. Jendai Ro watched him do it. She had not laughed once all night, not at the billionaire line, not at the wife line, not at any of it, and she didn't laugh now. Nathaniel went out to the hallway. It was cooler there and quieter, and there was a service cart against the wall with a stack of napkins nobody would ever use. He stood by the window and took out his phone. Ash had texted 11 minutes ago. It's signed. All of it. Do you want me to say anything? He looked at it for a long time. Down in the lot, his father's truck sat under a light with its hood dulled to gray, and past it the road ran out toward the interstate, and he could be on that road in 90 seconds if he wanted to be. He could feel the notebook against his ribs. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. There was a version of this night that ended in about 4 minutes, and every part of him that had been 26 years old at a kitchen table wanted it. He typed, "Don't." He watched it send. Then he put the phone in his pocket, and he went back into the room, and he got himself a drink he didn't want, and he stood at the edge of the noise like a man with nothing in his hands at all. People will tell you that silence is what growing up sounds like. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes silence is just another way of holding on to the anger, a fist you've learned to keep inside your coat, and the man who holds it longest isn't the strongest man in the room. He's only the most tired. The billionaire line should have died the way jokes die, but Vanessa had given the room a toy, and the room had nowhere else to put its hands. It came back within 20 minutes. A man named Grady Whitlock, who had been the kind of boy who repeated other people's jokes louder, stood on the low riser where the DJ table was and tapped a butter knife against a glass until he had the room. "I'd like to make a toast," Grady said. Somebody in the back already knew where it was going and started laughing before the first word. Grady put a hand over his heart. He announced that he wanted to thank the people who'd believed in him. He said he'd come from nothing, a hard-luck kid with a legal pad and a dream. He said that when the towers went up, the ones with his name on them, he'd think of every single person in this room. "And to my wife," Grady said, "who couldn't be here tonight because of work." The laugh that came out of the room was enormous. It had the particular quality of a laugh people have been saving. Nathaniel stood by the wall with a drink he hadn't touched and watched it happen, and what struck him was that not one of these people hated him. That was the thing he could never explain to anybody. There wasn't a single enemy in the room. Grady Whitlock had lent him a car in 11th grade. The woman howling by the dessert table had cried at his father's funeral. Marcus Deal had shaken his hand with both hands. They weren't cruel. They were just comfortable. Somebody had told them what kind of man he was, and it was an easy story and it required nothing of them, and so they picked it up and passed it around the room like a plate. Vanessa didn't laugh at Grady's toast. She'd already gotten what she wanted. She was over by the bar with her back half turned, and Nathaniel, who had spent 11 years learning the geography of that woman's shoulders, could see that she was checking the room the way a person checks a room when she's not sure the performance is holding. Corbin was on his phone. He hadn't looked at her in 15 minutes. Somebody clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder on the way past and said, "Don't take it personal, Nate," which is a thing people only say after they've already made it personal. He didn't take it personal. He took it, though. He put it somewhere. He'd been putting things somewhere for a long time. That was a skill his father had given him along with everything else. Titus Brooks had owned a set of tools that his own father had started, and he had finished 41 years of buying one good thing at a time instead of 11 cheap ones. The chest sat in the corner of the garage on Delmore Street with a coat of dust on the lid that he wiped with his forearm every single morning, and every single morning he opened it and looked at it for a second before he took anything out of it. The winter Nathaniel was 27. Vanessa got into a program downtown, and the program cost more than they had. She'd cried at the kitchen table about it. She'd said she'd wait a year. She'd said it in the specific way that meant she absolutely would not wait a year. He sold the tools in February, all of them. to a man in Rockford who paid cash and didn't know what he was carrying out to his van. Nathaniel drove to Delmore Street afterward and told his father, standing in the garage in the cold with the empty corner right there behind him, like a hole in a tooth. His father took a while with it. Then he said, "Tools can be bought back." That was all. No lecture. No forgiveness either, because forgiveness would have meant there was a crime and Titus Brooks didn't think there was one. He just looked at the corner for a minute, and then he went inside and made 2 cups of coffee. Nathaniel followed him in and said, "I'll buy the whole set back." Every piece. His father said that would be nice. He'd kept 1 hammer. He hadn't meant to. It had been in the bed of the truck when the man from Rockford came, and by the time he found it, it was too late to be honest about it. A 22-ounce framing hammer with a hickory handle worn into the shape of a hand that wasn't his. It was behind the seat of the truck right now in the parking lot, under the light 40 feet below, a room full of people laughing about a fake toast. His father had been dead 6 years. The promise was still open. The other thing he kept from those years wasn't a thing at all. It was a night one of maybe 400 that all ran together, except this one, which didn't. 3rd shift on the Kessler job, February, again the year Elijah was 8. Nathaniel had been running 2 crews and doing his own books at a card table because a bookkeeper cost money he didn't have, and the sitter had quit on a Tuesday with no warning, and there was nobody else. There had been nobody else for a while by then. So he took his kid to work. The side office was a trailer with a space heater that only worked if you kicked it. He put Elijah in the good chair with a juice box and his math folder and told him, "1 hour, buddy, 1 hour, and we go home." It was more than 1 hour. It was always more than 1 hour. When Nathaniel finally came back in at 4 in the morning, the boy was asleep, sitting up with his chin on his chest and his math folder still open on his knees, and at some point in the night he'd gotten cold and gone looking, and he'd found his father's work coat on the hook by the door and pulled it over himself like a blanket. It swallowed him. There was a kid in there somewhere under all that canvas breathing. Nathaniel stood in the doorway of that trailer for a long time. People liked to ask him, later investors mostly, and once a reporter, he never called back what kept him going in the early years. They wanted the answer to be hunger. They wanted a story about a man with something to prove. It wasn't that. He'd say it plainly if you asked him. It was the coat. It was a boy who had nobody but him in a cold room at 4 in the morning. He built the company for Elijah, not to prove anything to anybody. He'd said that sentence to himself so many times over 8 years that he'd stopped hearing it. That's the trouble with the things we repeat. They stop being true out loud and keep being true in your mouth. The boy had started asking about the truck that spring, not for a car. For that car, the one with the bad door and the hood gone gray, and Nathaniel had taken him out to the empty lot behind the lumber yard twice a month since May to grind the clutch and swear at it. Elijah had been driving it up and down that lot in first gear all summer, badly, seriously, like a man clearing his own land. Ash walked in at 20 minutes to 10. He knew before he turned around because a door opened at the far end of the ballroom, and one of those small shifts went through the room, the kind that happens when a stranger arrives somewhere that hasn't had a stranger all night. She'd left a job site at 8 and driven 90 minutes to be here. She was still wearing the badge on her lapel, the laminated one with the barcode and the orange border that gets you past a site gate, and her hair was pulled back the way she wore it under a hard hat, and she was carrying her coat instead of wearing it because she'd been moving too fast to put it on. She found him in about 4 seconds. She always did. She crossed that entire room without looking at anybody in it, and she came up beside him and took his hand, and only then did she turn around and face 40 people. "Sorry I'm late," Ash said. "I'm Nathaniel's wife." Nobody said anything for a second. Then a woman near them said, "Oh," and it was a very small "oh," and it did not sound like belief. It sounded like the noise you make when a story you've been enjoying develops a complication. Vanessa had turned around at the bar. Her face was doing something careful. Marcus Deal came over with his glass all shoulders and warmth and asked how they'd met, and Ash said at a job site, which was true, and Marcus laughed and said, of course, and then something happened to his face. He was looking at her badge. "Hang on," Marcus said. "Adeyemi, Ash Adeyemi, aren't you the you're not the one over at I Do Design?" Ash said. She said it lightly. She said it with a smile, and she said it directly across the front of his sentence, which is a thing that only works if you do it fast enough, and she did it fast enough. Then she asked Marcus about his daughter, because Ash had a memory like a rivet gun, and Nathaniel had mentioned one time on the phone that afternoon that Marcus Deal had a daughter starting at Fulton in the fall. Marcus lit up. Marcus talked about his daughter for 2 minutes. The thing about a subject change is that it works on almost everybody. Almost. 2 or 3 people in that little circle registered the small hitch of it the way she'd cut him off the speed of it and filed it somewhere and let it go because it was late and there was an open bar and none of it was their business. Vanessa was one of them. Nathaniel watched her file it. Ash didn't let go of his hand. She stood with him against the wall and they had 90 seconds of near privacy, and she used it to look at him, really look the way she did across a table when he'd said he was fine and wasn't. Her eyes went down to his chest, to the pocket where the shape of the notebook made a rectangle in the fabric that you could only see if you already knew it was there. "You still carry it," she said. It wasn't a question, so he didn't have to answer it. He didn't answer it. Something moved through her face, and it wasn't anger. It was worse than that. It was the look of a woman who had hoped for something and was now revising the estimate. Her phone went off in her coat pocket. She got it out and looked at the screen. Nathaniel couldn't see the name on it, but he could see what her thumb did, which was nothing. She turned the phone face down on the ledge beside her and left it there buzzing against the wood until it stopped. "It's the office," Ash said. "It can wait." Then somebody put on music and somebody else called her over to look at a photograph on the wall, and she squeezed his hand once and went. They turned on her within half an hour, and that's when Nathaniel started to come apart. It was the same joke, but it had a new target now, and the new target was better because the new target was a mystery. Who was she? Where had she come from? Grady Whitlock, that grinning, harmless, borrowed car fool, said it the loudest from the middle of a group of 6 people close enough that there was no way it was an accident. "Give her a year," Grady said. "She probably just doesn't know the truth yet." The laugh was smaller this time, not because anyone had a conscience, just because it was late. Nathaniel stood there with his thumb turning his wedding band around and around and around. He thought she walked off a site at 8 o'clock at night and drove 90 minutes, and she is still wearing her badge, and you don't know one thing about her. He thought about the 4 minutes in the parking lot and what he had told his wife in the kitchen and how he had believed it. He was still thinking it when Vanessa said her son's name. She was mid-story over by the dessert table, and she was doing the thing where she narrated her own life in a way that made it sound like a magazine spread. Somebody had asked because somebody always asks whether she had kids. "1," Vanessa said. "Elijah. He's God 16 now." She looked at Nathaniel across the room and she smiled, and she said it the way you'd mention a car you used to lease. "He's very much his father's son. Same everything. I always said the 2 of them deserved each other." The room went quiet for 1 full beat. It's an interesting thing about a crowd. A crowd will laugh at a man's dream. A crowd will laugh at a woman it's never met. But a crowd knows in some part of itself that hasn't been ruined yet what it sounds like when a mother talks about her child that way, like a possession that went to the other party in a settlement, and good riddance. Nobody laughed. Grady looked at his shoes. Vanessa registered the silence and covered it with a sip. Nathaniel didn't move, but every single thing inside him did. His face stayed exactly where it was. 8 years of practice, a lifetime of practice. His father's face, the face you wear when a building inspector is wrong and you need him to keep being wrong until Thursday. Underneath it, something stood up. He knew the sentence. It was 3 words long. He'd known it since 2016, and it would have gone through that room like a truck through drywall, and every person in it would have remembered it for the rest of their lives. He wanted it. Right then, standing on that carpet with a drink he hadn't touched and a notebook against his ribs, He wanted it more than he had wanted almost anything. Ash's hand closed around his. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking straight ahead at nothing, and her grip said one word, and the word was, "Don't." Across the room, over by the stack of chairs where she'd been standing all night, Jendai Rose set down her drink. And she stood up. Nathaniel understood what was about to happen the instant her weight came off that chair. He didn't know how. He'd known this woman for 4 years, 25 years ago in a chemistry class. But he'd watched her not laugh 3 separate times in a room where everybody laughed. He'd watched her tell a story about an anonymous donor while a man she despised took the credit with his glass and his modest little mouth. She worked in the alumni office. She'd handled the wire transfers for 5 years. She'd seen the name on every one of them. She was going to say it. He had about 3 seconds. That's what it takes to get across a room and put a hand on someone's arm and say, "Don't please not like this." 3 seconds. He'd made harder calls than that on a beam with the light going. 1, 2, 3. Nathaniel Brooks stood absolutely still and let it happen. "That's scholarship," Jendai said. The room turned. She had a voice that didn't need volume, which is the rarest kind. 11 kids, 5 years, every fall. She wasn't looking at Corbin. She was looking at the middle distance the way you look when you've decided something and you're just waiting for your mouth to catch up. "The donor's name is on the wire. It's been on every wire since 2019. She said it. Nathaniel Brooks. Then Jendai Rose sat back down and picked up her drink and did not say one more word for the rest of the night. The silence afterward had a texture to it. 40 people turned to look at a man standing against a wall in a jacket that didn't fit him the way their jackets fit them, and 40 people ran the same arithmetic at the same time and got a number they didn't like. And Corbin Vaughn, who had been standing in the middle of it, with a woman still smiling at him from the earlier misunderstanding, made the worst decision of his life. He panicked. "Okay, first of all," Corbin said too loud, "I never said it was me." Nobody had said he did. She said anonymous. I heard her say anonymous. I didn't. What am I supposed to do, stand up and announce it's not me? His hand was moving. And by the way, since we're doing this, the corridor thing, that's a procurement review, that's not an investigation, there's a difference. There's a very big legal difference, and my attorney handles all of it. I don't read that garbage. I've never read 1 page of it in my life. The room's silence changed shape again. Nobody in it had brought up the corridor thing. Corbin heard himself. You could watch it land. "It's a review," he said quieter. "Some out-of-state outfit filed a complaint. Cardinal Ridge. That's the only name I know. That's it. That's all it is." And then Corbin Vaughn stopped talking. He stopped talking because he was looking at Nathaniel Brooks, and his mouth was still slightly open, and his face was doing the exact thing that a face does when a man watches 2 pieces of his own life slide together in front of an audience. An out-of-state outfit nobody had heard of. A man who disappeared 8 years ago and had no LinkedIn. The room got there about 2 seconds after he did. You could hear it arrive. Marcus Deal had his phone out. He hadn't meant anything by it, that was Marcus always. He'd have told you he was just checking, but he'd typed 2 words into it during Corbin's speech. And now he was standing there with his glass in one hand and his phone in the other, and his face gone, the color of a man reading a bank statement, which, professionally speaking, was more or less what it was. "Cardinal Ridge Infrastructure," Marcus said. "It's on the wire. It's an hour old." His voice came out with a crack in the middle of it. "Corridor package, $412 million, signed this afternoon." He held the phone up like evidence he wished he hadn't found. "There's no names on it. It's private. It doesn't say one word about who runs it." He turned the phone back around and read the line again, and then he stopped reading and looked up, and he didn't look at Nathaniel at all. He looked at Ash. "The design partner on the sheet is Adeyemi Structural," Marcus said. "That's you. That's you, isn't it?" Ash didn't answer him. She looked at her husband. and she waited in front of 40 people with her coat over her arm and her badge still on her lapel, because she had promised him in a text message 3 hours ago, and she was not going to break it in a hotel ballroom over a joke. Nathaniel had one more chance to end the night as the man he'd told his wife he was. He gave her a nod. It was very small. It was maybe an inch. "It's his company," Ash said. "He started it in a rented garage in 2017 with 2 guys and a truck. It closed at 4 this afternoon." She looked around the room once without heat. "I'd have told you earlier. He asked me not to." The room came apart. It didn't happen the way he'd pictured it. He'd pictured, and this was the part he'd never admitted not to Ash, not to anyone, he'd pictured silence. Some clean, cold, cinematic silence, and every face turning, and the whole thing landing like a beam dropped from a crane. What actually happened was noise. It was loud. People said his name. Several people said it at once. Grady Whitlock was suddenly there with his hand out and his face gone bright red, saying, Nate, come on, man. That's just how I am, right?" A woman he genuinely could not place was gripping his forearm with both hands and telling him she'd always known. Marcus Deal was apologizing for something and trying to hand him a business card at the same time, which meant he had to put his glass down on someone else's plate to do it. Somebody wanted a photograph, and Vanessa was standing by the dessert table 20 feet away, gone completely white, holding a glass she'd stopped drinking from watching every single person in that room walk away from her toward him. Nathaniel stood in the middle of it, and God help him, it was good. It came up through his chest like heat off asphalt. All of it all at once, the hands on his shoulders, the sound of his own name in 40 mouths that had been laughing 4 minutes ago, her face across the room, that white, emptied-out face. He felt it in his teeth. He felt it in the backs of his knees. It was better than the contract. It was better than anything he'd felt in a decade, and it wasn't close. He had rehearsed this. He knew it the second he felt it. That was the thing that came for him right there in the middle of the noise. You don't get a feeling that clean by accident. You get it by practice. He had run this room in his head, in trucks, in airports at 2 in the morning, with the ceiling 3 feet from his face for 8 years. Every version, every line. He had built a company for his son, and he had also somewhere in there, in a place he had never once opened the door on, been building this. His phone buzzed in his jacket. "You coming home?" Nathaniel looked down at his hand holding the phone. It was shaking. Not from anger. He knew what his hands did when he was angry. They went still as stone that was his father in him. This was something else. Something with a light in it, something happy. His hands were shaking because he was enjoying himself. He had spent 8 years telling a boy in a canvas coat that he was building all of this for him. He'd said it so often it had stopped being a sentence and started being a floor he stood on. And he was standing in a hotel ballroom at 10 o'clock at night, watching his ex-wife's face come apart with his hands shaking from pleasure. He had won, and he had become exactly the thing he swore in a cold trailer at 4 in the morning that he would never be. Here is what nobody tells you about a crowd. A crowd does not change its mind when it meets the truth. It has no mind to change. A crowd only changes direction, and it turns fast, and it turns completely, and it never once looks back at the ground it just came from. The same mouths that laughed at 7 o'clock will laugh at somebody else by 9. They will do it with the same warmth. They will do it with the same easy conscience. And every one of them will drive home believing they were on the right side of that room all along. It took the room 11 minutes to find its new target. Nathaniel watched it happen from the middle of a circle of people who wanted his attention, and the strange thing was how familiar the shape of it was. The jokes started small. Somebody near the bar said something about Aspen, and somebody else laughed, and then a woman who had been holding Vanessa's coat for her earlier in the evening said loud enough to Carrie that she'd always wondered how the firm downtown could afford her. Grady Whitlock, who had stood on a riser at 8:30 with a butter knife in his hand, was the first one to say the word toast out loud in her direction and to grin about it. Vanessa stood by the dessert table with her glass and took it. She had nowhere to put her hands. That was what Nathaniel noticed. 11 years he had watched those hands move through a room, touching shoulders, arranging the air, and now they didn't have a single thing to do. She looked around for Corbin, and Corbin wasn't there. Nobody had seen him leave. He had gone the way men like that always go, sometime between the wire transfer and the first joke at her expense, without his coat, without a word, and he would tell a different version of this night for the rest of his life. She stood alone in the middle of the floor, 6 feet from where he had stood at 8:30, and 40 people arranged themselves in a loose ring around her and started passing a plate. Nathaniel didn't say anything. He found Ash's coat, and he found Ash, and they walked out. Behind him in the doorway, Vanessa's voice came across the carpet. Not an apology, not anything close to one. "Why didn't you say something?" He didn't turn around. The truck was cold. Ash got in on the passenger side and pulled the door shut with both hands the way you have to with that door, and left her rental sitting under the light because she said she'd deal with it tomorrow. They were out on the highway before she spoke. She didn't congratulate him. She didn't mention the $412 million or Marcus Deal's face or any of it. "Are you okay?" Ash said. Nathaniel watched the road come at them. "No." It was the truest sentence he had said all night, and it was the only one nobody had been there to hear. He reached behind the seat when they got home in the dark in his own driveway and carried his father's hammer into the house because he couldn't have told you why and didn't try. The video went up at 6:11 in the morning. Somebody had been filming from the moment Corbin started talking, one of those people who holds a phone at hip height and thinks nobody can tell. 90 seconds. It caught all of it. It caught Corbin's mouth doing the arithmetic. It caught Marcus reading off his screen with the crack in his voice. It caught Ash saying he asked me not to, and it caught the room coming apart, and at the very edge of the frame out of focus, it caught a woman by the dessert table going white. The title said, "Guy Gets Laughed At by His Whole Reunion." Turns out he owns a $412 million company. By 8 in the morning, it had 400,000 views. By noon, the number stopped meaning anything. Nathaniel sat at his own kitchen table and watched 8 years come off him in pieces. The first piece was the company. There had been a press release on the wire at 9 o'clock the night before, and it had been 3 paragraphs long, and it had contained a package name and a dollar figure and 2 corporate entities, and not one human being. That was the whole point of it. Cardinal Ridge had never had a storefront, never had a billboard, never had a founder's face on anything, and that had been a decision, not an accident. The video did in 90 seconds what the press release had been built to never do. It put a name on it. It put a face on it, and a truck, and a dead father's jacket, and a story. His phone started at 7:40 and did not stop. 3 reporters. A number in Springfield he didn't recognize. 2 men he'd walked job sites with for a decade, asking in the careful way men ask why he'd never said. The second piece wasn't his. Adeyemi Structural had been a line of text in a press release nobody outside the trade would ever read. By 9 in the morning, Ash Adeyemi was a woman in a clip standing in a hotel ballroom with her site badge still on her lapel in front of 40 people who had spent the previous half hour laughing at her telling 2 million strangers who her husband was. She had spent her whole career keeping herself off the letterhead. He had watched her do it at 9:45, watched her cut across Marcus Deal's sentence with a smile, because she did not want to be recognized in that room, and then at 10 o'clock, he had given her a nod that was maybe an inch long. She didn't say a word about it. She made coffee. That was worse. The third piece was the one he hadn't seen coming at all. The comments were at 9,000 and climbing, and they had found her. Somebody had her full name by 7. Somebody found the firm she'd name-dropped at the bar, and somebody else noticed that her page there had gone quiet back in January, and from that one small silence, the whole crowd started building, guessing, inventing, filling it in. They didn't know anything. They didn't need to. A crowd with a hole in a story will pour whatever it has into it, and what it has is usually cruelty. And guessing is worse than knowing because guessing never runs out. He had set the knife down on the carpet at 9:50 last night. Somebody else had picked it up before the sun came up, and they were using it in front of an audience of 2 million. Elijah came into the kitchen at 8:10, still in the shirt he'd slept in, and put his phone face up on the table in front of his father. The boy's face was not proud. "Dad." His voice did something in the middle of it. "People are saying stuff about Mom." Nathaniel looked at the phone. Here was the arithmetic, and it was simple, and it took him about 4 seconds. He could do nothing. That was allowed. He hadn't filmed it, hadn't posted. It hadn't said one word in that ballroom, and the whole world had already agreed he was the good man in this story. He could close the laptop and let it burn itself out in a week, and no one alive would ever hold it against him. Or he could put his name on something. He had never in his life put his name on anything. Not the company, not the fund, not one wire, not one press release, not one photograph. It was the only thing he had managed to keep for 8 years, and there was exactly one way to spend it, and it would only work once. He wrote it on his phone with his son standing there. "My name is Nathaniel Brooks. The video going around was taken at my high school reunion. Please stop. My ex-wife is the mother of my son. He is 16, and he can read. You weren't in that room. I was. Please don't write about her like you were." He read it twice and pressed send, and just like that, a man who had not existed on the internet for 42 years existed on it forever. He never explained the last line. He never explained about a credit card being handed back at a bar at 8:20 in the evening, and a woman laughing about her bank and a man turning his head away before she could see him seeing it. He thought about that card while he wrote the sentence. He had thought about it in the ballroom too for one long second, standing in the noise with his hands shaking, because he had known since 8:20 that he could end her with it, and he had known since 8:20 that he never would. That night after the house went quiet, Nathaniel took the notebook out of his jacket and put it on the table under the lamp. Black cover. Corners gone soft. The first entry was dated 2016, and it was 3 lines long, and it was 3 words at the center of it that he could still see with his eyes closed. He had never written it to remember. He'd have told you that was why. He told himself that was why for 8 years, the way you tell yourself anything you need a floor to stand on. He'd written it for Elijah, every page. The night she left and what she said and what she didn't take with her. The birthdays, the 2 Christmases. The 17 months without a phone call, documented, dated in a contractor's handwriting, because a man who builds things for a living knows that the only thing that survives an argument is the paperwork. He had built a case. He had been building it since his son was 8 years old, so that someday when the boy was old enough, someday when he asked, Nathaniel could put a black notebook in his hands and say, "Here, read it. Now you know who was right. Now you'll never blame me." And that was why he had gone, not to close a door. He had told Ash that in the kitchen with his hands on her shoulders, and he had believed it all the way down, and it had been a lie the entire time, and the proof of it had been sitting in his glove box under an expired permit slip. He'd gone to get the last page, the closing argument. The room her face, the whole thing written down at last, dated, filed, the ending he'd been saving a place for since 2016. He sat there with the pen for a long time. Then he shut the notebook and got up and put it in the back of the cabinet over the refrigerator behind the roasting pan, where a person would have to be looking for it. He didn't burn it. Burning it would have been another kind of performance, and he'd had enough of those for one lifetime. He just put it away because his son should not have to hate his mother in order to love his father. The screen on the counter lit up while he was standing there. Her name. 12 words, the first honest 12 words she'd sent him in 8 years. He read them and he left them there, and he turned off the light. In the garage, on the shelf by the door, sat a steel chest with a coat of dust on the lid. Every piece his father had ever owned was in it or as close to it as a man can get with 15 years, and a list bought back one at a time from estate sales and pawn shops, and a machinist's widow in Rockford who had no idea what she was selling him back. In the middle of the top tray, where it had always gone, he set down a 22-ounce framing hammer with a hickory handle worn into the shape of a hand that wasn't his. Tools can be bought back, his father had said in the cold, in the empty corner of a garage on Delmore Street. 15 years, 6 of them talking to a man who wasn't there anymore. The promise was closed. Jendai Ro's message came in the next afternoon. You don't know this, and I'm only telling you once. Recipient number 3, fall of 2020. Her name's on your list. She graduated from Purdue in May. She's my daughter. I wasn't going to sit in that room and listen to them laugh at you. He read it standing in his own driveway. 5 years ago, he had sent money to a school in a town he'd left quietly with no name on it for a girl he had never met and would never meet, and that money had put a woman in a folding chair in a ballroom on a Friday night in July, and she had been the only person in the room who did not laugh, and when it mattered, she had stood up. It had come all the way back around to him in the dark, and he'd had no idea it was coming. The fund couldn't stay anonymous after that. Once your name is on the internet, it belongs to everybody, and by August, the school wanted to put it on a plaque. He didn't give them his own. He gave them his father's. The Titus Brooks Scholarship. A carpenter's son, a carpenter, a man who had bought one good tool at a time for 41 years and never once been in a room like the Halloran on a Friday night. The thing he lost that morning turned out to be the only thing he had that would outlive him. Sunday on the back porch, 3 cups of coffee. Ash brought hers out and put a hand on the back of his neck on her way past and sat down on the far end of the step with the paper. Elijah came out barefoot a minute later and sat below his father's chair, half a head taller than him, standing up and looked out at the yard for a while. He didn't ask about the money. He never once asked about the money. Why'd you stand up for Mom? Nathaniel turned the cup in his hands. There was a whole speech in him. He'd been writing it in a way for 8 years. Because you were watching, he said. The truck sat out at the end of the drive with the dew going off the hood. Nathaniel dug in his pocket and tossed the keys down, and his son caught them without looking the way you catch something you have already been promised. 4 months later, in a hallway at his school, a boy Elijah barely knew got laughed at by 6 people over something small. Elijah Brooks could have laughed. It would have cost him nothing. It never cost anybody anything. He didn't. That was the part that got passed down, not the $412 million. And in November, in a coffee shop 2 states away, Vanessa sat across from the only friend she had left and said out loud for the first time that she had lost her job in January. That was all. She didn't get a redemption. She got a crack. His kindness never saved her. It only left a gap in the wall wide enough that she could finally stop performing in front of it. People think kindness means never hurting anyone. It doesn't. Kindness is standing in a room with the knife already in your hand, knowing exactly where it goes, knowing it would land and setting it down, and then never telling a living soul you were holding it.